No state of the state would be complete, particularly not a state of the state of mind. No responsible discussion of New Jersey's future can happen in this room without a discussion of the sword of Damocles that hangs over the head of every New Jerseyan, our pension system, and how it dominates any hope of building on the success of the last 8 years. In 2009, I was proud to start a discussion that no governor in America was honestly having. The discussion on our broken state pension system and how its unaffordable promises were choking the ability of state government and its citizens from investing in the future. No one wanted to really talk about it. The good news for me, though, was that the only other public official in New Jersey who had honestly discussed this issue was elected Senate President the same year I was elected governor. A perfect storm, some might say. Previous governors and legislatures virtually ignored the growing menace of increased costs and no real contributions. Benefits were regularly made more generous, assumed rates of return were irresponsibly increased to hide the problem, and I want you to hear this. For 14 straight years, not enough was contributed by the state to even cover that year's costs, let alone the exploding unfunded liability. Let me be clear about this too. It was done by both parties. It was done when economic times were bad. It was done when economic times were booming. And so, in my last time in this chamber, I am tired of hearing the baloney that is spewed on this issue. Let's go to the facts and let's go back to the 1980s and every decade since. Governor Kane drastically increased benefits for police and fire personnel and did not pay for it. It was paid for by quietly increasing the assumed rate of return in 1988. Governor Florio increased the assumed rate of return again only 3 years later from 7% to 8.75% to avoid making any pension payments. Governor Whitman floated backloaded pension bonds, which will cost us 4 times what we borrowed when we finally finish paying them off in the next decade. Governor DeFrancesco drastically increased benefits for all pensioners, and no additional funding was put forward. Governors McGreevey and Governor Cody made virtually no contributions to the pension funds in their shared 4 years. And Governor Corzine stubbornly maintained the assumed rate of return at over 8.25% to continue to hide this growing problem from the public and avoid even larger expected pension payments. Both parties, for 30 years, added to this problem. They didn't talk about it. They not only didn't fix it, they made it worse each and every year. And then they deposited it in my lap in January of 2010 and said, it's your fault. We didn't hide the problem from the people. We didn't hide from confronting it ourselves. I got on the road, I traveled the state, I held town hall meetings, and I sounded the alarm. And what do we get in return? We were regularly attacked for it by union leaders who have never cared how we would pay for all these reckless promises. They've only cared that the checks keep coming. No matter the road to ruin it put the other 8.1 million New Jerseyans on for the future. So what did we do? In 2011, we passed historic reform that made employees pay a more realistic share of their pension costs, pay some share of their health insurance costs, and end cost of living adjustments until the funds were once again solvent. These reforms will save $120 billion for the system over 30 years and have staved off, for the time being, the insolvency of the system. While the state had to adjust our payment plan from 1/7 to 1/10 per year, the reforms made sense then and they make even more sense now. But we didn't stop there. To further secure the system, we dedicated the lottery to the pension system for the next 30 years. This dedication, along with the state's payments, will get the funds to 90% funded within 30 years. And it's another step this administration took to secure the pension system. We also have made unprecedented cash contributions to the pension system. In our 8 years, we have contributed $8.8 billion in cash to the system. This represents 2.5 times more than the last 5 governors before me combined. If such contributions had been being made all along, our problems would almost be non-existent. We also took a diversified, professional, and bipartisan approach to investing these funds for the last 8 years under Republican Bob Grady and Democrat Tom Byrne, who is with us here today. Our returns have beaten those of most public plans, even while taking less risk than 90% of them. That is the fact. Here's another one. The market value of the fund since February of 2010 has increased by $10 billion, even though in the last 8 years we've paid out $70 billion in benefits. But despite all of this, two things remain true. We still have a big problem to tackle, and that problem will only be solved by making these benefits more realistic for both pensions and health insurance. A bipartisan commission has laid out a plan that can and will work if you all finally have the will to implement it. If we do not, let me assure you that there are not enough taxes to raise or programs to cut to feed the insatiable beast of public employee pensions and Platinum Plus health benefits. And let me assure you of one other thing. No matter what you do, unless it involves complete capitulation, you will be vilified by the public union leaders. Now, we've seen that play out with me for 8 years, and for my Democratic friends, if you think you're immune, I'm sure your attention was drawn to a small legislative race this year. Let me tell you about these folks. Their actions speak louder than their words or their money ever can. If you don't believe me, let's review the record one more time. The facts. More money contributed than the last 5 governors combined. The lottery completely dedicated to the pensions. Quarterly payments rather than annual payments. All these things were signed by this governor, yet I think few have been more publicly criticized by these union leaders than I have been. See, the solving of this problem will not lead you to be loved. The gratitude you ultimately receive will be from future residents who won't be living in a bankrupt state where 8.1 million people are working every year until June or July to pay the retirement and health benefits for 800,000 retirees. That is unacceptable. That is unsustainable.